What's the scariest thing that happened to you when in someone else's house? I once spent the night at a friend's house. His drunken uncle shook me awake and then my friend as well with all the noise he was making. I opened my eyes, started to see a gun to my face and he demanding who the F I was. I was scared speechless and just looked at my friend hoping hex chip in for me. He did. He said, "Uncle, that's my friend." "Sure, uncle, that's my friend." His uncle then put it down and just walked away as if nothing had happened. He was drunk. Hey, Big Smoke, it's me. Chill. I was house sitting for an aunt of mine while she was on holiday. She told me there was a leak in the lounge area but it was fixed, so if there were any issues to let her know. A massive storm happened a couple nights in. I heard some trickling in the early hours so I went to go check that there wasn't a leak. The entire wall was flooding with water, like an actual waterfall. Turns out the spouting was blocked and the water was just forcing its way through the cracks in the wall. I knew it wasn't my fault, but it was so terrifying watching someone's house fall apart on your watch, just piling towels on the floor and shifting furniture to keep everything dry. I was at this stranger's house to give him some money for accidentally hitting him on his bike. I was also on a bike, and the first thing I notice is that his house is really dark. Not in that his lights weren't on. His house didn't have lights at all. No ceiling lights or lamps or anything. Homeboy legit used a flashlight around his own house to get around and find things. Next thing I know, this guy who I've spoken maybe 100 words or less to is showing me a straight up two-handed sword and matching dagger that are both razor sharp. This is one of those people who have a harder time being quiet than thinking of things to say, and next thing you know I've been into every room in his place and met his pet parrot the size of a freaking eagle. The reason I was there in the first place was to replace a handmade Italian seat for his bike, and he ended up giving me a pair of $30 gloves. The old gloves that got a few scratches on them when I hit him, 510 high-end protein power bars, and a glass of strawberry lemonade. Definitely a strange experience. Unexpectedly wholesome. I wasn't in the house, but just outside it. I went to visit my paternal grandmother at her house. She kept the door locked so she had to come over to unlock it when I arrived. Her living room has large windows that overlook the street and you can even see the door from there, so I could easily see her and she could see me. My grandmother was frail and suffered from arthritis, and in fact she passed not long after this. As she was walking to the door she fell down in the living room. I had no key to the house and I was freaking out. I had no idea what to do. I was ready to freaking break the living room window and or call 911. Then she somehow managed to climb back up using furniture to prop herself back to her standing position and open the door. After that day I demanded a key to the house from my parents. I hate to think what would have happened if she didn't miraculously get back up. I felt so helpless. Nearly as hopeless as the time my maternal grandfather fell crossing a busy street and traffic was starting back up down the street. At least that time I was able to prop my grandfather up and carry him over to the side of the road before the cars reached us. Moral of the story: watch for your elders falling. The first time meeting my boyfriend's family, who live in another country, we stayed in his old attic bedroom. In the middle of the night, he reaches over and shakes me awake. I mumble and he says, "SHHH. Be very still. I think there is someone else in the house." I lay motionless, thinking that someone has broken in and I'm about to be psycho murdered. Listening to the sounds of the old creaky attic, convinced every gust of wind is a footstep. He puts his arm around my head, covering my ears. I don't move for hours in fear, until I hear him snoring. And that was the night I discovered, for the first time, he talks in his sleep. We were in bed discussing things we need to pick up at the store. I was making a mental note: so, eggs, milk, bread. I think that's all. Anything else? He goes, "Oh, can you add rope to the list?" I go, "Yeah, sure." A few seconds pass. "Wait, what do we need rope for the net?" He says. "Cool, what net? You know, the net for the trap." "What trap?" "The trap for Vince Vaughn. We have to stop him. Stop him before he kills us." Cruelest sleep talking I've ever heard of. A friend's kids when I was in the army. I was crashed out on the couch early one morning when the door flung open and 3 kids that didn't live there entered the house. The one in front had a gun. They were making a beeline for the kids' bedrooms and had not noticed me on the couch. Scared as crap but not gonna let them just kill the kids I was watching. I jumped up and barreled into the lead kid and took the gun. There was screaming and the kids I was watching came running out into the front room. Turns out it was a BB gun. The kid with the gun had just received it as a gift and wanted to show the kids I was watching. The visiting kids had been told by the resident kids that their rents were away for the weekend, so they just barged in. Of note, they were all like 13, so it wasn't exactly hard to take the BB gun. Still scared she crap out of me. I had hallucinations from a fever while staying over at a friend's and thought the dad was just downstairs screaming all night. It was like living through a horror movie. I still have nightmares about it almost 20 years later. The fever was so bad I had a seizure the next day. It's good to know I'm not the only one who hallucinates when having a severe fever. Didn't know this was actually a thing. I've found myself being unable to tell if I'm awake or asleep. When I was around 11 years old, I got exploding diarrhea all over my best friend's bathroom. I got very close with her mom that night because I had no idea what to do and she came and helped me clean it up. We grew apart after we graduated high school, but she still reminds me of it sometimes. Now it's funny, but it was traumatizing. Spending the night at a friend's place in early high school. We were taking a walk around the block and turning onto her street when her little sister runs out of their house and screams bloody murder. She starts running for us, yelling he's killing her. Friend's name. He's killing her. We all run to the house where the mom is getting beaten by the stepdad. It was a house, and in the middle of the night we heard some rustling around in her enclosed patio, which was adjacent to the living room we were sleeping in. We shrugged it off because she had two very active outdoor cats who generally slept in the patio. When we woke up the next morning and went out there to eat breakfast, we saw the screen door had been slashed and several pieces of furniture, TV, etc. were gone. So the rustling we heard in the middle of the night were actually burglars. Not sure if they knew that several teenage girls were in the living room, but still freaks me out a bit when I think about it. Good thing no one snored. Used to talk about a ghosts in his house that would turn on the radio in the kitchen when you left the room. Called Bores. Well, about a month after, I am waiting on him to get out of the shower, and am in the kitchen having a snack. As I open the cabinet, the radio behind me turns on. I jumped, turn it off, then remember the story. Was afraid to go to the kitchen after that. Scary, but only happened the once to me. His mom didn't want to throw it out or move it in fear of angering whatever it was. Not sure whatever happened to that radio. I had a radio like that in my apartment in university. It was old and the alarm was triggered by the hour hand aligning with another hand that you could move with a knob. It'd randomly go off. My GF and roommate were convinced that a ghost was doing it, lol. They didn't like my less spooky explanation that the decades old mechanism was just worn out and malfunctioning. Stayed with my BF and his parents for a few weeks. One night, they left me home alone for a few hours. I decided to take a bath. Ventilation fan is on full blast, door is closed, water is running, so I don't hear the beeping. When I turn the tap off, I hear alarms blaring and a robotic voice saying fire, 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 and someone is banging on the front door. I run downstairs in a towel while calling up my BF. Neighbor is at the door because he heard the alarm. He has no idea who I am. Alarm company couldn't get a hold of anyone, so they called the authorities. Cop cars, ambulance, and fire trucks show up. Neighbors all crowd on the lawn. I'm still in a freaking towel. Firefighters conclude the steam from the bath set off the alarm. I die of humiliation and never take a bath there again. I die of humiliation and never take a bath there again. Nice of you not to haunt the tub. Age 6-8ish. Slept over at a friend's house with my little brother. Her father woke us all up in the middle of the night, had us bundle up, and loaded us in the family minivan. He drove to a gas station and talked the whole way about how a bakery exploded behind their house. He said the resulting gases and such could kill us, so we had to try and drive as far away as possible. They were also our next door neighbors, so I was worried about our parents' safety. At the gas station, our friend's mom bought us snacks while he canvassed the area. I told her I didn't hear any explosion and asked about my parents. She must have called them from a payphone during the snack run. because they pulled up a few minutes later to take us home. I was, of course, terrified to go home. Later, our parents sat us down to explain that our friend's father was sick with something called schizophrenia that makes him hallucinate. I was a freshman in college when I spent Christmas with my high school buddy who didn't go with his family out of town. I went to his kitchen to get a drink when I looked out his kitchen window and saw two figures jumping his fence. Luckily I saw them before turning on the light, so they didn't see me. I quietly told him to get ready to call the cops when I saw them making their way to his door. Without thinking I ran to the door and opened it and yelled, "LAPD. Freeze," and luckily the two figures got scared and ran away. Thinking back on it, they sounded really young and they were probably just gonna ding dong ditch the place or something. But to be safe I stayed with him until his family came home. Plot twist, he lived in NY. When I was like 8 or 9 I was at a relative's house for a family gathering when one of my distant relatives flipped out and grabbed a kitchen knife. I don't remember the details but I'm pretty sure he was threatening people. I remember being ushered into a side room with everyone else and being cramped in there for like a minute or two just listening while a few male relatives who had remained outside with the guy encircled him, got him to calm down, and disarmed him. I learned later that the dude's brain was like partially fried or something from drug abuse. Never saw him at any family gatherings again after that. I was cat sitting for some family friends. As I approached the house one evening, I noticed a light was on that hadn't been on that morning. I walked in the front door and yelled up the stairs, but didn't hear anything. There were small things that had been moved around, a knife on the counter and some trinkets, etc. But nothing was missing except the cat. It never came running for its food. I checked all the rooms but no sign of the kitty. I even checked the fridge and noticed the pepperoni had been moved from the shelf to the drawer. Why did the cat burglar move the dang pepperoni? Well, it turned out that the family had a maid that I didn't know about and she had accidentally closed the cat in a closet. One of my friends from childhood would have really bad night terrors. She would either wake up in the middle of the night screaming at the top of her lungs or she would randomly jump up and start running for the front door trying to get away from whatever she thought was chasing her. It was always pretty terrifying waking up to her screaming or tripping over me while trying to get to the door. Argies. This was my childhood too, only I was the one having the night terrors. I still have them from time to time and feel bad for my husband for having to deal with surprise nighttime screams lol. I house sat for my childhood crush when we were 12ish as her family went on a 6-week road trip around the US. They had a cat and a bird and you see where this is going. This stupid little finch got out of its cage. Legit. The cage was closed when I returned the next day, and the cat killed it. I was obviously scared out of my mind of being the guy who killed Crush's bird, so I did the only logical thing and went to the pet store and bought both of the finches they had that looked identical. I had about 2 weeks to figure out which was more like the cat bait and then, not knowing what to do with the other, I kept it. They never found out, or told me if they did, and that's the story of how I ended up with a pet finch. House sitting was the wrong word. I went over every day to feed their animals, bring in the mail, etc. They lived pretty close to me. Y'all are some sick fricks. We were 12. My mom had finches too, hence why I was tasked to take care of this one. We just added it to the flock. The cage had slide up doors for the food and water tray. I'm convinced that's how the bird got out. Wanna see a cool trick? Sure. Friend proceeds to bang his head against the wall, then falls flat to the ground and barely breathes. I panicked. We were alone. Turns out he wanted to prank me but actually passed out. Woke up while I was panicking and decided to keep to his act. Also, when I was 16, this guy's dinner table was full of coke I didn't use, and we suddenly heard sirens and saw blue flashes through the window. We heard them kick a door and yell for a bit. Turns out it was a drug bust next door. Lovely neighborhood. Turns out he wanted to prank me but actually passed out. Woke up while I was panicking and decided to keep to his act. Well, points for the freaking commitment. A friend was doing some long-term house sitting and invited me over to hang. The owners were aware and okay with this. We went down into the basement, since that's where the TV was. We got about halfway down the stairs and see this thing sitting on a shelf. It was about the size of a small dog and kind of fuzzy. It didn't look alive, but the prospect of a dead thing was even worse. We noped out and went back upstairs to watch Netflix on the laptop instead. About a week later, my friend texted me. The thing was a mushroom garden that they'd put down there and apparently completely forgotten about. What the frick? Moldy fungi stuff freaks me out, so I'd be scared af. This happened when I was like 8. I went over to this girl's house, really liked her. Her older brother told us about Bloody Mary, and she was ecstatic to try and summon her, so she asked me to come with her, and of course I said yeah. So we go in there, turn off the lights, shut the door, she starts chanting it, and the brother starts pounding on the door, screaming. When we tried to open the door, it was locked, and he kept pounding and screaming, oh god, she's got a knife, help. After like a while he finally let us out, laughing his butt off. Mirrors freaking scared the crap out of me until I was 16, and I am still wary of them to this day. He didn't lock it, he was leaning against the door or put something against it. I used the word lock to describe that it wouldn't open. Sorry about the confusion. Oh god, Bloody Mary. I used to hate being in the bathroom in the dark. I always thought she was going to come murder me. Not technically in someone else's house, but I was babysitting a special needs 2-year-old, and the kid wanted to go play outside. No biggie, but since it was fall in Alaska I wanted to make sure that it wasn't too cold out. I stepped outside to check their thermometer. The door locked behind me. I had no phone, and since it was Alaska the closest neighbor was too far away for me to leave the kid alone in the house to get help. So I ended up ramming into the door in a panic until the lock broke and I could get in. The kid was okay, got in the laundry but otherwise had no idea where anything was wrong. I thought I would get in trouble for breaking their door, but the mother said I could have broken a window and she wouldn't have cared. The mom paid me $50 for it, though, and that's a lot of money for a 12-year-old. To be clear, I didn't break the door itself, just the lock. Their lock wasn't a standard deadbolt or anything. It was a gate latch that was opened by a hidden string on the outside. The door couldn't be unlocked because the string had wrapped around the locking bolt, so it would pull tighter the more it was pulled. I opened the door by slamming against it enough that the bolt bent and I could get my fingers in there to lift it. It took a good hour or two of bashing the door. They replaced it with a deadbolt the next day, and I was the 12-year-old. The kid was 2, and the mom was in her 30s. IDK. Sorry if that wasn't clear. That is an appropriate mom reaction. This was when I was really young, like 7 or 8, and it's one of those memories where I'm not sure if it was real or just a crazy dream, and it was too long ago to tell, but I'll tell it anyways. Was with a childhood friend at his house in the boonies. He lived in a real run-down house, but his neighbor down the road was pretty affluent, with a great house. He said he wanted to go exploring, and being a kid in the desert, I was down for that. He led us to the house, where he somehow convinced us to climb through the guy's doggy door into the house. Pretty great house. I still remember the layout vividly. Anyways, here we were, exploring some random guy's house, when we hear a door open. My friend had thought the owner wasn't home because the neighbor's car wasn't in the driveway, so he thought we were safe. We sprinted and hid behind separate leather couches in the guy's living room. He came out into the kitchen, wearing a bathrobe and nothing else, and got a glass of water, reading a magazine. We watched him from behind the couches as he took his time and finally went back up the stairs. We sprinted out of that house and back to my friend's house, and I don't think Usain Bolt himself could have beaten my 7-year-old sprint. It was pretty scary then, but it's absolutely terrifying now to think what could have happened. TLDR. Snuck into a random guy's house with a friend as a kid, almost got caught, will never break and enter again. We used to door knock and run away as 13-year-olds. We did this one guy's house really loudly and he came looking for us. He was shirtless and rippled with muscle. He found us hiding behind a little brick wall in a park garden and shouted at us for ages that we had woken his child up. We stopped door knocking after that. When I was about 16 I had spent the night at my best friend's house. During this time there were rumors going around that I was gay because I came out to a previous friend who decided to share it with others. My best friend knew of my orientation but it did not bother him at all. During this sleepover, I remember laying on the floor while he was in his bed. I was still laying opposite to his head, which angled me towards the opening of his bedroom door. In the middle of the night I get this jolt of adrenaline in the middle of night, as I had the feeling that someone was watching me. I still had a cover over me and made a hole shape to peek out of. The door was cracked open. It was completely shut before we both knocked out. I stared deeper into the crack and noticed what looked like another pair of eyes staring back. I get this horrible pit in my stomach as the eyes continue to look around the room, right up to the point when it locked onto my eyes. The door began to crack open wider. I see a full head peek its head in at an attempt to get a closer look of something, when all of a sudden this thing bursts the door open shouting, "I caught you," while removing the covers off my friend. My friend immediately shouts, "What the frick," and flicks on the light switch. It was his mother. She stormed out of the room and slammed the door to her room. Me and my buddy had a hard time falling back to sleep as we were trying to figure what that was all about. The next morning I overhear my friend talking to his mom while I was in the bathroom. Apparently she heard I was gay and that she always had a feeling. She was trying to catch if I was doing stuff to him in his sleep. Freaking ridiculous was my reaction, but I washed up and told my buddy that I would be going home. Her head popping in was some scary crap. Never told him why. We are still best friends, I just avoid his mother. The daycare my little sisters and I went to was down the street from our house. One day my then 2 or 3 year old sister told my mom her private area hurt and that won't use the real name, but it was the daycare lady's husband, had put something in there and that it hurt really bad. My mom obviously took her straight to the doctor, where they had came to the conclusion that she was definitely penetrated and the authorities needed to get involved immediately. Well, before the ball could get rolling on that, the daycare lady had informed us that her husband had left town and had written a note talking about how he had done horrible things that he could never take back and how they would never see him again. Upon the police arriving, they had found Chili P, the guy was a photographer, on the guy's private computer involving several kids from the daycare. About a day or two after all of this, local forest rangers reported finding a body in the woods by a camp area outside of town. They identified him as the husband with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. It gives me chills thinking about the horrible crap that was happening in that house while I was there. My little sister is doing amazing, by the way. She moved to SoCal for school and is working her way to becoming a hospitalist. She's an extremely strong person who graduated high school with a 4.4 GPA despite being homeless with my mom and bouncing around from couch to couch. She's an amazing. New to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.